Yeah, so for those of you who are joining us, we're here with Preston. He's going to be discussing strength training, the secret to running injury free. Preston has a great story to be able to share and a bunch of experience as well as some knowledge to impart upon all of us to help us stay more injury free as runners. For those of you who don't know, I'm Eli Kerr. I'm the CEO and founder of Gnarly Nutrition, and I just want to make sure you guys know a little bit about Gnarly as we get started. You know, we do a full line of all natural sports nutrition products. They all happen to be NSF certified, and we're really focused on designing nutrition products for athletes who pay attention to what goes inside their bodies. And we've tried to make really quality products that actually taste delicious. And if you go and check out any of our reviews on our product pages, most people really love the taste of our products. We've been doing these clinics, longevity clinics now for almost a month, and we have another month of them basically happening. So we encourage you to participate in these clinics. They're all focused on, you know, how do we prevent injuries? How do we deal with injuries when we have them? You know, are there recovery tips? And what can we do to establish and maintain kind of a baseline health of health and nutrition? And we've titled these campaigns or these clinics longevity in sport. So we've got a rad lineup. We've had a super rad lineup, a lot of really good feedback. So we encourage you, if you haven't gone to any of the other ones or you haven't signed up for the future ones, go and sign up. They're all free, which is super cool. During this time too, we're in the midst of launching a couple of products, one of them being our new Gnarly Collagen Pro, which is really focused on helping to prevent injury and the repair of tendons, ligaments, like general joints. And you know, it really fits into this whole theme of longevity in sports, and we encourage you to check out that new product, Collagen Pro. Following this clinic, sometime tomorrow, we'll send out, you know, a recording of the clinic so you can watch it again if you miss anything. And for people who haven't been able to participate, they can, you know, watch it at their leisure. Within that email, there'll also be, you know, a discount to try Gnarly Collagen Pro and another gift that we have for you as well for participating. We encourage you to, you know, jump on social media, follow us at Gnarly Nutrition, take a picture of the clinic tonight or something that, you know, Preston shares with you and post it on social, tag Preston, tag us. I'll put those both those handles in the comments so that you guys can find both Gnarly and Preston. The other thing too is just at the very end of this clinic, there'll be a short survey. We would love it if you just take 2 minutes to fill out the survey, give Gnarly some feedback. Also, you know, gives you an opportunity to give Preston some feedback that we will share with him as well. So, and then we ultimately want to know if you like this kind of content, if we should keep doing these kinds of things. So again, if you're just joining us, this clinic is strength training, the secret to running injury free with Preston. And in this clinic, Preston's going to be focused on common misconceptions runners have with strength training. He's going to discuss why strength training is essential for runners, how common running injuries can be prevented through strength training, and how to fit strength training into your, you know, training plan. A little bit about Preston. He was a top-ranked prospect in track and field coming out of high school. He endured 4 years of injuries while competing in college, which ultimately culminated in hip surgery. His surgeon gave him a 50-50 chance of ever competing at a high level again. Following surgery, he was able to revive his running career through his increased focus on strength training as a means of injury prevention. And in 2019, he set 4 course records, claimed 9 overall victories out of 11 major races on trails and on the roads. And he continues to train in Utah in hopes of representing the US at a global championship. So with that said, I'll turn the time over to Preston. Preston, a couple things too is people have the opportunity to be able to ask questions.
Okay.
There's a little button down here that's marked as Q&A. People can hit that Q&A button, and that's where we prefer them to ask questions. If people happen to ask them in the chat, I'll ask them to ask them in the Q&A. I can help you manage those Q&A questions if you want me to. Totally up to you.
Okay, yeah, that would be awesome.
I'm gonna make you a co-host too, so if you need to take over and share your screen, you're welcome to do it. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Preston, I'm gonna stay here, but I'm just gonna, dissolve into the background.
Alrighty, thank you so much. That was a great introduction, and I'm super honored to be able to present and get to present with Gnarly Nutrition. They're such an amazing brand, and I feel fortunate to have them on my side and be a part of their team. Just 1 second. I'm going to share my screen here.
Preston, are you seeing the screen share at the bottom? Are you having access to it?
I am, but it is not pulling anything up. Let's see. There it is. Okay. Perfect. There it is. You guys see my screen okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. Like Eli said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about strength training and being the secret to running injury-free. Hopefully, early on, my screen was having a little bit of time catching up, loading, so hopefully we won't have any internet problems here. But if we do, we'll blame it on my computer. I just got a new Mac. I've never been a Mac person, but I'm totally going to blame it on that if that's the problem. So to get started here, I'll talk a little bit more about my story and then kind of the overview that Eli brought up as well, common misconceptions endurance athletes have about strength training, why strength training is important for runners, how to incorporate strength training into your running plan, and how strength training can prevent common running injuries. So we'll start off just by looking a little bit at my career and I guess how I got to where I'm at right now. My love for running really started in high school. I was never a runner or ever wanted to be a runner prior to that. I remember hearing stories about runners in my area as I grew up and thinking they were absolutely crazy. And so it's strange to look back and see me as one of those crazy people now. I was a soccer player. I loved playing soccer, but when I got into high school, I wanted to get in shape for soccer tryouts that winter. And so I made the mistake of joining the cross country team, and I was hooked from the beginning. I absolutely loved it. In high school, I was fortunate to be on a pretty good team as well. We had a lot of great athletes. I was able to go on and become a two-time All-American in high school, both in cross country and indoor track in the 5K, as well as lead my team to a top 3 place finish at the team national championships in Portland, Oregon. And I was such a great experience through there. I was fortunate enough to be able to sign a letter of intent to run for Weber State University in college. And up to that point, my running had gone really well. My training I love to train. I love running. And so even and put a mileage to all that was important. So this success side was kind of about I gave up a lot of a social life in high school because I was somewhat addicted to it. I loved it, and thankfully, so did some of my friends. And so I always had, a few people to run with, no matter where we were at. But in college, that's when I started to have some issues injury wise. My freshman year went more or less pretty well. I was able to, in my first race on the track, set the stadium record at UNLV in the 10K. And then from there is when things kind of started going downhill. I had issues ranging from bad cases of plantar fasciitis that lasted for up to like 18 months to 2 years. I had stress fractures, strained ligaments, and then ultimately ended my college career after 4 long years of injury after injury by getting hip surgery on a torn hip labrum. And it was really disheartening. I was still able to train really hard through the entire time, but I was never able to recover and fully be able to come back like you should from an injury before you jump back into training, with how rigorous the college NCAA system is of really just having one season right after the other. You go straight from cross country to indoor track to outdoor track, and then back into like a base building phase in the summer. So I felt like I was stuck on this escalator of um, getting injured and then trying to rush back and then getting injured. And so I never really had time to um, get back the right way and really be able to take care of my body the way I should have. So coming out of college, I had hip surgery and had it done just at Tosh in Murray. And they did an amazing job. I was told going into the surgery, I really only had a 50-50 chance of ever coming back and competing at a high level again, because a lot of the time surgeries like this wouldn't take care of the pain. And mine in particular was due to an extra bony growth I had on the neck of my femur. And so they were not only fixing the labrum, but also scraping away that bone and trying to make that a more natural fit to my hip. And so after surgery, there was about 4 to 5 months of time before I could start running again. In that time, I was honestly back in the gym 2 days after surgery. I couldn't walk and I couldn't move my leg at all, but I would just go sit down on the arm ergometer, which is basically just a bike, but use your arms to pedal, and just try to get some form of endurance training in. And so even if that was just for my sanity and be able to get out and be able to do something, I absolutely loved that. And being able to get out and work and still be able to push towards my goals. Cause I kind of feel like I had this chip on my shoulder. I had gone into college hoping, be an All-American and come out of college signing a professional contract and to go on to compete that way. But obviously it went the complete opposite direction. And so I was highly motivated coming out of surgery to keep training, keep going. And I had a lot of success with it. Within that first year of surgery, um, surgery was in 2018. So by 2019, Eli kind of read off a few of my stats from that year, setting 5 course records, winning 9 out of 11 of the big races I ran, and then signing contracts with a few amazing brands, Gnarly Nutrition being one of them, to be able to represent them and to be able to represent brands that I truly loved and truly believed in. It really meant a lot to me, and was to me one of the biggest wins of my career, to be able to get back to that point after having surgery and being told that that might not be a reality. Um, and I think a large part of that was due to how I had to restructure my training after surgery. During those 4 to 5 months after surgery, um, probably 90% of my time training was in the gym lifting weights. And so I got a huge appreciation and understanding of how that can impact your body, and how that influenced my running through that time. In school, I studied exercise physiology. And so I had a good understanding of it, but it always hits home when you have that own personal experience that really drives the message home for you. So I hope I can share that with you guys today and talk to you guys a little bit more about that. First thing I want to get into is some common misconceptions endurance athletes have about strength training. But before we do that, we're going to hurry and hit a study that I found done by ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine. And this will relate back to some of those misconceptions because it does answer a lot of those in a real life situation. So what they did is they took 17 well-trained runners, 8 males and 9 females, and randomly assigned them to 2 different groups. And these runners prior to hadn't been doing any strength training. So it was purely just people that were out, loved to run, and were well-trained at it. So they'd been going for at least 5 years of running. And so in the control group, they had no strength training exercises. And in the intervention group, they prescribed those athletes to do half squats at max weight and to do them 3 times a week, 4 sets of 4 rep maxes. So 4 times they would do 4 straight reps of as much weight as they could for 3 times a week. And alongside that, both groups continued endurance training for 8 weeks, along with prescribed strength training. So we'll get back to the results of that in just a second. First, we're going to talk about some of the misconceptions that runners have. So some of the most common ones that I see among athletes that I've coached, that I've interacted with, both as an athlete or just through friends in the community, are the misconception that if you are lifting heavy as a runner, you're going to bulk up and gain lots of extra weight, which lots of the times in a running sense would be a negative thing. 2, not having enough time to strength train. And then 3, that they should be doing lightweight and high reps for endurance athletes. Basically thinking that, okay, we're out here running for an hour at a time. And so we need to be doing exercises that kind of mimic that while they're out training. So the first one that we'll talk a little bit more about extensively is, will endurance athletes bulk up from lifting? And in short, with runners, the answer is no. And we'll get into more, the different styles of lifting that we'll be doing there, but really it doesn't matter. Even if you're doing your high weight, low rep, something more explosive training, for the most part, runners will not bulk up. You'll naturally gain a little bit more weight just due to the increased muscle mass, but it's never anything that would be substantial enough to be detrimental to your running. We got to remember that our running energy cost and the amount of time that we're running far outweighs the amount of training that we're doing lifting. And so if you think of that calorie balance, you can't really put on more muscle unless you're taking in a lot more calories than you're burning. And as runners, where we spend so much time running, and not only the calories we burn while we're running, but the calories we burn after running from that training as our body tries to rebuild itself and recover from that run, far outweighs the amount of lifting we're doing to be able to bulk up. And then on the side from that as well, runners generally, as far as muscle fiber types, have type 1 muscle fibers, which are your slow twitch muscle fibers. So they're the ones that are highly dependent on oxygen. They are very, they're meant to be used over long periods of time, and they don't have a large tendency to increase in size, which is called hypertrophy, which is muscle fibers increasing in size as opposed to increasing in number. And then again, hitting back on that lifting frequency, if you were to take the ratio of how much we're running versus how much we're lifting, there's a huge disproportionate amount to how much we're running. And so unless you're taking on, an extra 2,000 calories after your runs, you can't build matter out of nothing. And so you won't magically just get bigger from lifting just because you lifted something. And so no need to worry about that in the gym. How much time do you need for strength training? As runners, we already have a fairly long workout schedule, just in the fact that, you know, endurance athletes were out there for hours pounding the pavement or the trails or on the treadmill, whatever it is that you like to do. And so, to a lot of people, the idea of once you're finished, you're already fatigued and tired, and coming back and then doing some lifting as well seems burdensome. But I think we have this false idea that we need to lift for a long period of time to be able to get the benefits from it. And we got to remember that something is always going to be greater than nothing here. I have this kind of recommended amount here on the site here, 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, 5 to 6 exercises, 2 to 3 sets of each exercise. But that should just be like the goal. Those 5 to 6 exercises, I've found that you can really get a well-targeted, well-balanced training plan in just by doing those 5 to 6 exercises, and keep it interesting. Time doesn't seem like it will be as much of an issue when you're enjoying what you're doing. And so if you're adding in new exercises and new ways to target specific muscle groups, that helps with that as well, and that excitement of getting into strength training. The last misconception that I see, and we've hit on this a little bit already previously, is whether we should be doing our lightweight and high reps, or whether we should be doing high weight and low reps. And so to cover this topic, I'm going to get into a little bit about the exercise physiology of how our body utilizes ATP, which is our energy source, to be able to do certain activities. So we have 2 main energy systems that provides our body with energy. We have our anaerobic system, meaning that that system is not dependent on having oxygen. And we have our aerobic system, which means that it is reliant on having oxygen. That's going to be our primarily our main system when it comes to distance running. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to run very far without oxygen. And so if we break those down even further, the anaerobic system without oxygen has 2 different subgroups: the ATP-PC group, which only lasts, we can only store up to 8 to 10 seconds of energy in that energy system. And we have our lactic system, which lasts between 30 seconds and 120 seconds. So really with those, we're mainly talking about, you know, in track and field terms, like the 100-meter dash for the ATP PC. And for the lactic system, we're really talking about, you know, races like the 400-meter up to the 800-meter. And so obviously, I would assume that most of the people on here are more oriented towards some of the longer stuff. And so obviously the aerobic system is going to be the most important in there. And this goes to further break down those energy systems and how we utilize our energy. So in the marathon, we are 99% aerobic. We still have a small fraction of that that is dependent on the anaerobic system. And that's because we are never using exclusively just one group. It's always a spectrum of all the different energy systems being utilized together to be able to give us the energy we need to do whatever it is. And you can see that that ratio becomes a little bit split as the distances get shorter and shorter. 10K, 94% aerobic, 6% anaerobic. And then the mile, we're pretty even, 50% aerobic, and still very important to be able to hit all of those groups there. So if that's the case, you know, you're a marathoner, you're 99% aerobic and 1% anaerobic. Why is it important to lift heavy with low reps as opposed to lightweight and high reps? When only 1% of your energy is coming from that anaerobic system? Well, I like to word it as raising your ceiling. So essentially, on this graph here, this white line represents the pace at which we're running, but still maintaining being in using the aerobic system primarily. So this blue line right here is your aerobic threshold. And as you train over time, you begin to be able to maintain a pace closer and closer to that aerobic threshold for a long period of time. But the closer you get to that line, the amount of benefits that you start to see start to diminish. And so even if you start putting in more training, you only start to grow at a slower and slower rate. And so by working on this anaerobic system, we're in essence able to raise our ceiling, be able to increase the amount of load our muscles are able to put out, and to be able to create more room for that pace to grow, and that aerobic threshold to grow. Because an easy way of putting it is you'll never be able to run a marathon at the same pace you're able to sprint. And so you have to first like increase the top end speed so there's more room for that aerobic system to grow within your body's ability. So when we're out running every day, we're essentially doing a lightweight high rep plan. When we're out running, we're doing thousands of essentially bounds off of one leg over and over and over. And so if we come back into the weight room and start doing a lightweight high rep plan there as well, we're essentially going to be neglecting an entire energy system and the gains that could be beneficial there. So it's important to address each system individually and be able to grow as a whole, as opposed to putting all your eggs in the basket of growing aerobically. So we'll go back to that study. The study results, just a quick refresher. The control group was given no strength training. The intervention group was told to do 4 sets of 4 rep max for half squats, 3 times a week for 8 weeks. And the results were that in those athletes that were doing strength training, their 1 rep max improved by 33.2%. Their running economy improved by 5%. And time to exhaustion at max aerobic speed increased by 21.3%. And the big catch here, and there was no significant weight gain. So these athletes were all just strengthening that tensile fiber within those muscles, and getting stronger that way without putting on any significant amount of weight. There was a little bit of weight gain, but that's just natural, like I said, with having more of a higher body fat percentage, or a lower body fat percentage there. And so even in the lab, they had seen lots of benefits with that, just as what we were just talking about. Other misconceptions. If anyone else has any questions about them right now, I would love to address some of those if there are any. Eli, were there any questions in there? Where I have it full screen, I can't see the Q&A. Oh, there it is. Looks like we don't have any right now.
No questions have come in yet.
Okay.
Perfect. There's a general question that was actually asked on the chat, which is just like,
okay.
What day, it's a pretty general question. What days do you strength train? And you may be answering this later in this conversation, so you can wait.
Yeah, definitely. That is something I'll get to a little bit more into later on. But I guess quick answer now, just really focusing on keeping your easy days easy and your hard days hard. And so kind of fitting it in between there on the harder days is great. Is it still showing the other misconceptions slide right now?
Yes, but it's not on your main screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I've never presented on Zoom before, so I'm learning as we go here. Might
close the audience tools.
Okay.
We have some questions coming in that you might be able to answer while you're
Yeah,
figuring that
while I'm
out.
trying to figure this out.
There's another again a general question that says, what strength training do you recommend for runners? I think that's something that you're going to be covering specifically too.
Yeah, I'll get into more specific exercises as we get going there. Um,
Another question is, where does the lactic acid threshold fit in to all of this?
so it's going to be right above the aerobic system. And so really the lactic threshold is the point at which your body can't buffer the lactic acid fast enough to prevent it from building up. And so because it's all a spectrum, you're going from like an aerobic point and you're still building up lactic acid there, but your body's able to buffer it and handle it at that point. And so it's really once you get past where your body can't handle the amount of lactic acid it's building that you start to have issues and it starts to kind of the whole system. And that's when you start to hit more of that ATP PC, which is your creatine system. And that's, like I said, only lasts 8 to 10 seconds. Once you get to that point, it really is a fast um, downward spiral to exhaustion at that point.
Good. Here's some really good ones. Some misconceptions that some people are expressing. One, my misconception is that I'm afraid I'm going to wear myself out for my runs.
Gotcha. Yeah, and we'll get that. So for that one, I have a specific slide for that later on as well, kind of how to build it into your training plan. But you just got to remember as well that with our training, that is almost the point of why we go out and work out. We work out to be able to break our body down so that it can build back stronger later on. And so there's naturally going to be a little bit of a downfall with your training when you start that lifting, and you got to be able to be patient with yourself to be able to say, this is normal. This is what's supposed to happen here. And then really taking your easy days easy so that you can recover from all of that, and then really hitting it hard on the hard days. And then I like to put my lifting after the run on those hard days, just for the sake of, we need to prioritize what is going to make us the best, because obviously we become better runners by the law of specificity doing more running. And so if losing running is going to come at the expense of adding in lifting, then you're probably jumping in too fast. Probably start out with less reps, less sets of what you're doing, and only do it like once or twice a week to start out with. Really just a small amount to slowly be able to introduce that into your training without having any big downfalls in your running.
Awesome. I think that you can build off of some of what you just said for some of these other questions. One of them, a misconception, not being able to fully recover from strength sessions when doing hard running workouts. Do the key running sessions, i.e. track workouts, suffer when heavy lifting is included in training?
I think definitely towards the start, but I would say it starts out being like a negative thing, a negative impact on those workouts, but eventually becomes more of a positive thing. Your lifting is going to give you the opportunity to be able to exert more force when you're running. And so being able to incorporate that in your training to begin with, yes, may make those workouts a little bit slower to start with, but it's going to have the opposite effect later on when you start to adapt to that and be able to have that more into your training.
Body weight exercises. Do you try to avoid these and stick to quote unquote weightlifting?
Not necessarily. I think it comes down to a lot of, what you have available for you. I prefer to have things with weights just because then I can change the difficulty of the exercise a little bit easier. But body weight exercises in particular are really great at maintaining your range of motion. With running being such a, there's one movement that we do thousands and thousands and thousands of times out in our run. We start to lose range of motion, and so especially after a run, going through like some body weight exercises or range of motion drills can be very beneficial as far as maintaining that range of motion. But as far as benefits from lifting, I think it's far more beneficial to be able to increase the load and be able to lift heavier.
Good.
Okay.
So one last question, Preston, and then we'll push on. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I understand wanting to work all systems, so lifting heavy, but is there any research comparing high weight, low rep group with a low weight, high rep group? That's the first part of the question.
Okay. I haven't looked at any specific studies for this. I'm sure there are studies out there. But the big difference coming from doing a low rep, high weight and low weight, high rep, the two, is that when you're doing that higher weight, you are increasing the amount of force that your body's able to exert, as opposed to working that aerobic system where you're basically just working on your capillary to mitochondria density, and your body's ability to deliver oxygen to your muscles. So when you're able to increase the amount of force your body's able to put out, that pace, so let's say if you were running 7-minute pace, if that was 90% of your effort, can then become 80%, 70%. There's a lot more room to grow there as opposed to just continuing to run and train that same system. And you may become more efficient at that, but you're not going to be able to grow much past that.
Good. Her follow-up question is if you do an anaerobic workout, would you want to switch and do the low weight high rep rather than high rep?
I would say no, just because it still is going to be such a small portion of your training. Because if you think about, if you do a speed workout 2 times a week and maybe one of those is an anaerobic workout, that's going to be maybe 10% of your weekly output. And so you're still going to be primarily doing aerobic work. And so even like what I've seen being coached through college and high school and afterwards as well, most coaches I talk to, the purpose of lifting is to have that anaerobic work done there, and then be able to translate that anaerobic work that you do in the weight room to using it in running by doing anaerobic work running as well, because there's not always a complete translation from lifting heavy to sprinting faster. You kind of got to adapt that and cross that bridge by doing a little bit of both.
Perfect. That's everything, Preston.
Okay.
Forward.
Let's keep going. All right. So why strength training is important for runners? Strength training is important for runners for two main benefits, for injury prevention and for improved performance. And within that improved performance realm, there's 3 different ways that it will improve our performance, through neural adaptations, through our nervous system, through muscle hypertrophy, which is the increase in size of our muscle cells. We don't increase in number, we increase in size, and improved running economy. So first we'll talk about the injury prevention side of it, and why runners get injured. This diagram here is actually, it represents a very microscopic view of our muscles. So this is called a sarcomere. It's a very basic unit of a muscle fiber, and it displays how our muscles contract when we are using our muscles. So we have these Z-shaped, oops, go back. We have these Z-shaped lines here. They're called our Z lines or Z discs. This is where a new sarcomere starts and it connects to the next one on the other side. And then we have our actin filaments, which are the red horizontal lines. And we have our myosin filaments, which are the blue lines in between. And our muscles contract in the same way as if we were interlocking our fingers. The myosin filament pulls on the actin filament. You can kind of see some of those myosin heads there. They pull on that actin and move the Z lines closer together. And so when the Z lines all move closer together from one end of the muscle all the way to the next end of the muscle, it's shortening the muscle and contracting the muscle. And so as we repeatedly do this over and over and over, we start to get small tears on these Z lines or Z discs here. And when that builds up over time and we don't allow those to recover, that's when we get injured. We start to lose the function that that muscle had because the Z lines are so damaged that they can't be used for their intended purpose there. And so that's why recovery is so important, because we are literally breaking some of these bonds here. And if we don't recover, we can't exert as much force out. And so that happens both from running and our lifting, and can be troublesome there. So for improved performance, lifting allows those three different adaptations. We got our neural adaptations, our muscle hypertrophy, and our running economy. Our neural adaptations are the very first thing that you'll notice changes with. In that study that we talked about at the very beginning, it was held over an 8-week period of time. And most of the benefits that were seen in that study would probably fall underneath this neural adaptations part here, because obviously as athletes, it's always about the long game. It's never about what's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week. It's always about, training in perspective of what kind of an athlete do I want to be in years from now. And that's very much so how the benefits come as well. It's never this one workout's going to change my life. It's always this group of workouts is going to make me better and better. But these neural adaptations are pretty rapid and are things that come almost on onset with this new training stimulus. Because it is essentially synchronizing our motor units that are firing when we are contracting muscle. And so those muscle fibers are able to, we're able to recruit more muscle fibers when we are improving our neural adaptations and be able to recruit those in a more efficient way when we're out running, because we have used them to their full capacity in other ways. So that's another reason why lifting heavy is important, so that we can be able to recruit more motor units and be able to use those as runners. Obviously with running, there's a little bit of muscle hypertrophy or growing of those muscle cells. And for me, the strength portion of it that comes with this hypertrophy is all about muscle balance and eliminating the weak link. Our body is constantly compensating and helping out in different areas that may be weaker than others, and identifying those muscle groups or those areas that may be weak are huge in forms of preventing injuries. If you have, one of your 3 hamstring muscles is weaker than the other 2 are constantly compensating for it. And so that can cause those other 2 muscles to have injuries and things like that, because they're working harder than they would originally have to, because you have this weak link per se in your chain. So having a full body, holistic approach to your lifting and focusing on entire muscle groups and your whole body, as opposed to just focusing on I don't know. You see the people in the gym that'll focus on their look good muscles. You know, they want to get big biceps and they want to get nice abs and things like that. But it's all about having the holistic approach of strengthening your entire body um, to help that all work together to become stronger. And then it also helps with our running economy. It lowers the aerobic cost that we need to run at a faster pace. So when we're used to putting in 100% um, effort into our lifting and more of that explosive stuff, the amount of effort you have to put into running, you know, at 70% of your max effort is a lot lower than it would have been had you not trained that top end 100% utilization of those muscles in your training. So now we're going to get into how to incorporate this strength training into your running plan. Really, this is the most important part of this presentation in my mind. This is, you know, talking about how we can use what we just learned to be able to become better runners ourselves. The information is useless if we don't know how to use it. And so if you have any questions about this, make sure to send those in and we can address those, but I'll do the best I can to kind of give my perspective of what I've done and found works and what the science says as well of what works for distance runners. So I've already said this a few times, but keep your easy days easy and your hard days hard. Most runners have the tendency when they start a lifting plan is they'll do their hard workout days. And because they're so fatigued from those, they're like, you know, I'll just lift on the next day. The problem is with that is you're never fully recovering because you're going from hard day running to hard day lifting to hard day running. And this never ending cycle of doing something hard every single day. And you're not able to recover from those the way that you need to be able to become better runners. And so I structure my week. I generally will do 2 hard running workouts a week, and then I'll lift hard about 3 days a week. And so I will make sure there's always at least one easy day between everything there. So on Monday, I'll generally do an easy run, and then no lifting. Tuesday, I'll generally do a hard workout on the track or on the roads, and then I'll lift afterwards. And then Wednesdays is my easiest run of the week. I will. This is like your guilty easy pace. You should feel almost like you feel guilty about going so slow, but you shouldn't. Going easy on those days is really important. And then no lifting. And then I'll do my next hard day on Thursday, where I will run fast and then do some lifting as well after that. And then this third lifting day is more of just like, I enjoy lifting. I want to get out and do it. So I'll lift again after my run on Saturday, and just run easy Friday, long on Saturday, and then lift afterwards. And then either take a rest day Sunday or just do an easy run then. And that's what I found that works best for me. That's what I've seen with most elite groups as well, is that's how they structure their training. Generally 2 hard workouts and a long run, and then lifting on those days as well, with more some like really light, almost like those body weight exercises, range of motion drills on the easy days. And then prioritizing elements of your training as well. I touched on this towards the beginning as well with one of the questions that with the law of specificity, we become better runners by running. And so if running isn't our focus and we're not getting most of our training there, then we're missing the mark in becoming better athletes that way. And so if, you know, we need to make an effort to put the strength training in there. But when it gets to the point where it's like, I'm trying to put so much strength training in that it's starting to affect my running negatively, then we kind of need to rebalance that and find the balance where, you know, I can still do my hard workouts, but I'm still strength training, and those things are working together as opposed to taking away from each other. And so whether that be just decreasing the amount of reps or sets that you're doing of something, or maybe having one of your lifting sessions be a little bit more on the lighter end. I still think it's good to be able to lift heavier, but instead of maybe doing like a 4 rep max, do like 8 reps for each set, and do your like 8 rep max there. All right. Coming to the end of that, was there anything that was submitted there, Eli, that was about prioritizing the elements of your training and introducing strength training into your training plan?
There are two questions.
Okay.
One of them is around age. Does
Okay.
being older, 55 plus years old, does it change the reps, intensity, frequency, or rest?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just as, if not more important to have a strength training routine the more you age. Just because generally the older you get, your ability to be able to handle that work and reintroduce new work and be able to adapt from it starts to diminish. So, and it's the same with any sort of training. If you were to stop running or doing any sort of exercise and then try to get back into it, you'd have a lot harder time adapting back to that. So, but as far as introducing that into your training, you need to be a little bit more hesitant with it. And so for you, it might be a little bit more beneficial to start with like a lighter weight and then slowly introduce yourself up to that higher weight and focusing on the strength at that point. And being able to still introduce it that way, but just being a little bit more cautious about your approach to it.
Great. This question too, I'd probably put an asterisk on this question because this is a multi-sport athlete asking about, managing strength training with cardiovascular training, right? So running training, and I would probably put an asterisk on this, that a specific coach in this area might help you, and also like Preston, I think you're really focused on the idea of strength training, runners utilizing strength training to avoid injuries. And so this kind of is a different problem altogether, but I'll throw it out to you. Strength training 2 to 3 times a week is beneficial for running, as you suggested, but how would we determine that volume and intensity of those strength sessions for multi-sport athletes, i.e., Spartan racer? When strength training is a bigger component and those athletes need to include muscular strength, muscular endurance, oh, I don't know this word, proprioception, skill work, in their training along with running. What considerations should be taken when you are not strictly a runner and your sport demands other skills in order to be successful?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think there's a lot that can go into that. And I think, like Eli said, kind of addressing someone that's more specific to that realm would be more beneficial. I have never done any sort of multi-sports or Spartan races type events. And so I don't want to claim to be like an expert at that that realm. But I would imagine that it's still really important to be able to put in that training for the same reasons that it's important for a runner, because that does increase your engine size and being able to become stronger in those kind of events. I think would be just as important, especially with like the Spartan stuff that is going to introduce a lot of strength-based exercises and stations, tasks. I'm not sure the correct word there, but um, I would think that it would have just as much of his importance.
Yeah, so just getting to know, some of our athletes. One of our athletes, Corinna Coughlin, specifically, is a Spartan athlete, And her training is much much different than like yours, right, Preston, or
Yeah.
even a typical runner. And so I think that that question's probably better answered by someone who specifically does that kind of training. So Arsh, I'm sorry that we can't really give you the answer that you're looking for. um, Last question here before you can move on, Preston. Do you recommend rolling on the days you strength train? I find that I need to roll the kinks out more often now as I rack up the miles.
I presume that's like a foam roller is what he's alluding to.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, recovery is a huge part of this, and any way you can boost that time it takes to recover is going to be huge because ultimately, the faster we can recover and then do another hard workout, the greater the rate at which we're going to be improving. And so, if we're able to recover at a more rapid pace by doing that afterwards, then I would find that that would be extremely beneficial.
Perfect. That's it, man.
Okay, move on. All right. So, how can strength training prevent common running injuries? So, this next part, um, I am just going to throw out a few really common running injuries. And by no means do I want to say this is the end all, fix all to all of these, because there's a lot of different factors that go into injuries and what can cause them. But I've found these exercises, and different studies have found these exercises in muscle groups. Training them can be very beneficial in preventing these sorts of injuries. And then I want to put a plug in there as well that um, to always ask a doctor or a trained professional about these sorts of things as well. And that there's so many different things that can be going wrong, that's purely just relying on things you read on the internet or learn from a friend can be advantageous to your training. But with that in mind, I'll go forward and try to tackle a few of these. So the first one is very common among distance runners, shin splints and lower leg stress fractures. And kind of defining what shin splints are, it really is a catch-all term to any pain surrounding that shin bone, that tibia. And so there can be a wide range of things going on with that. And so that's why I say, make sure you talk to a doctor and get a more accurate diagnosis of what's going on. But if this is the case, this is some of the things that have been found to be really beneficial to that. We have three major muscles that I think are very important to target when we're talking about shin splints and lower leg stress fractures. If you're experiencing the pain more on the front side of your shin, focusing on this tibialis anterior muscle, and the left picture on the diagram, that front muscle, the tibialis anterior, is huge for that. So that muscle controls the dorsiflexion of your foot, or bringing your toes up towards your knee by bending at the ankle joint. And so different exercises that have helped with that particular muscle, doing like a farmer's carry where you're walking on your heels just across the room with weights in your hand, is really great at eccentrically loading that muscle and stressing it and causing those micro tears that promotes the growth and strength of that muscle. Because essentially, when this muscle starts to break down from our running, when it's not strong enough to take the load that it's put on, that force then absorbs. And so when the side,
Hey, Preston. the
Yeah,
la-
we just lose it.
the last about 60-ish seconds, you might want to go back to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, is my screen still being shared?
Not right now. We see your
Okay.
handsome face.
Perfect. Let me pull that back up real quick. All right, we're back.
Yep, that looks good. If you just want to rewind just a little bit.
Yeah. So we were talking about that anterior tibialis muscle on the front of the shin bone there, and how that muscle, when it's not properly strengthened and it's overloaded when you're running, can't absorb the shock from running, and it is instead absorbed by that tibia, the shin bone, right on the front of your lower leg. And so we can strengthen that muscle by doing different exercises. That muscle controls the dorsiflexion of our feet, which is pulling our toes up towards our knee. And so different exercises that I really like is like a farmer's carry. So if you're walking across a room on the heels of your feet while carrying weights in your hands, that really gets that eccentric contraction going with that muscle and strengthens it that way, and can be really beneficial. Another place that runners experience shin splints and lower leg stress fractures is along the medial side of that bone or the middle side of it. And that is actually more indicative of having pain with two of the muscles of your calf complex. And so you can see them both in the middle picture here. The gastrocnemius, the bigger of these two muscles we're going to talk about, is actually cut away in this picture, but you can see the origin of them up towards the knee joint here. This is the big calf muscle. You can see pretty easily just by looking at your own leg. And then just deep to that, so in between that muscle and the bone, you have your soleus muscle. And these muscles are what create what is then your Achilles tendon that connects down to your heel bone or your calcaneal bone. And so when these muscles, they control the plantar flexion of your foot or the pointing of your feet downwards. And when they can't absorb shock when you are running, or they become worn down and tired, again, the bone starts to take that shock. And so working on them doing calf raises, and in particular bent knee calf raises, you are able to reduce the rate at which that happens. And we need to do both of those, both straight knee and bent knee calf raises, because they focus on each of those muscles individually. So our gastrocnemius, the bigger muscle in the back, connects down from our heel bone up onto the end of our femur bone, actually just above our knee. And so when your knee is straight, that muscle is pulled tight. Whereas if your knee is bent, then it's shortened a little bit. And because it is the bigger muscle, when that one is pulled tight, it's going to take the brunt of the workload. And so the soleus doesn't get worked as much. So if you have your knee bent and you're doing calf raises, then that will strengthen primarily your soleus muscle. And if your knee is straight, you'll strengthen primarily your gastrocnemius muscle, and you'll get a well-balanced workout with those calf muscles. So here's kind of the different examples of, a straight knee calf raise and then a bent knee calf raise. And then different ways you could potentially add weight to it, either by holding weights or by having a barbell on your back. We won't watch these videos, but these give you a good idea of the form you should be having with those. Also, a side note with the bent knee calf raises, there's also machines at the gym that do a really good job at this. They just put weight across your lap. You like sit on a little chair, puts weight on your lap, and you do calf raises that way. I prefer that than to doing these standing calf raises. just because you can load up the weight a little bit more there, and there's not the balance factor in that. So you can really focusing on the strength portion of it as opposed to trying to maintain balance while doing it as well. Achilles tendonitis. This is going to, again, play into those same two muscles we were just talking about, your gastrocnemius and your soleus muscle. It is going to have a lot of the same consequences and needs as the shin splint group that we we're talking about. Excuse me. And so strengthening those again with calf raises and bent knee calf raises, and making sure those muscles are properly recovered is going to help prevent any issues with that Achilles tendon and any Achilles tendonitis that may be seen there. Next thing we're talking about is patellar tendonitis, or knee pain in general. And again, this one does have a lot of different things that go into it. But in most cases, this is what I've found to be the biggest issue with receiving knee pain with runners, is having imbalanced quad strength, or having a lack of quad strength in one of those 4 quad muscles. So you have 4 different quad muscles, and they really control the tracking of that kneecap, that patella in front of your knee, as they connect directly to that, and then also insert on the top of your tibia or shin bone via the patellar ligament, or the patellar tendon, a patellar ligament right here that connects to you from your knee bone to your shin. And so make sure those are very strong through doing things like squats, lunges, or like knee extension exercises at the gym, are all great ways to single out those muscles and strengthen those, and be able to prevent issues there. And if you're doing any of those free motion type exercises, such as the squats and lunges, just make sure to look into proper form and making sure that you are doing those correctly to try and prevent any issues that may arise because of that. And then running gait instability. You've probably heard people talk about this a lot within like the run specialty realm, at like running stores, when you're looking at different shoes that may be prescribed, with either pronation, rolling inwards of your foot, or supination, the rolling outwards of your foot. And those have a lot to do with your fibularis or muscles, which are on the outside of your leg. You can see them displayed on this left image here on the very outside. You have your fibularis longus and your fibularis brevis, and they control the E version of your foot, which is when your foot, the bottom of your foot points outwards. And so it would really be preventing excessive supination or rolling outwards of your foot. And then your posterior tibialis, your flexor digitorum longus, and your flexor digitorum brevis, flexor digitorum longus and flexor hallucis longus, all help with preventing pronation. Those are on the inside of your leg, on the middle side. And those the easiest way to target these, I found, is by getting like a resistance band, tethering one end to like a table, the other to your foot, and then just doing eversion and inversion movements of your ankle and your foot to strengthen those muscles there. The last one I want to hit on is just IT band syndrome. That's probably one of the next most popular areas in which runners experience pain. And IT band is actually a huge, is innervated by a really small muscle, your TFL, your tensor fasciae latae. And that muscle is responsible for the abduction of your leg, or moving your leg away from the midline. And so with the nature of how small that muscle is, it can easily be fatigued. And so there's lots of other muscles that help with that, that kind of balance that out. And so strengthening your glute muscles, in particular your gluteus maximus, which runs more laterally across your hips can really help with preventing any pain on your IT band, because it will control that external and internal rotation at the hips, and be able to keep that aligned. When those muscles are weak, runners tend to have a little bit of an inversion with their knees. So when they run, their knees point inwards. And so that puts a lot of weight just right on top of where the IT band's at. And since the muscle that innervates that IT band is so small, it can't really hold the whole weight of our body. And so making sure that those glute muscles are strong enough is huge in distributing that stress across the different muscles, and preventing any extreme tightness, tearing, or anything in the IT band. And that's everything I had for today. If there are any other questions, I can definitely answer a few of those, though. But again, I'm very grateful and thankful for all of you guys for coming, and hopefully you were able to learn a thing or two.
Preston, awesome. Everyone, Preston's willing, I think, to hang out for a couple more minutes if you have any questions and you want to submit them via the Q&A. We've gone a little bit over, so we're stoked that you hung on and have spent the extra time with us. Preston, super grateful for you sharing your knowledge and experience, telling your story, and diving into some very specifics that we can all use as runners. This is one that I'll have to watch, multiple times, to get all of the context out of. Everybody's saying thank you, and it was super cool.
Good.
Looks like we're not getting any additional QAs, so we will follow up with an email tomorrow with this recording so people can watch it again. And Preston, we'll create an opportunity for people to be able to contact you if they have additional questions or something like that.
Definitely.
Cool. Preston, thanks so much. Good to see you. Good to be with you. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. Stay healthy.
Thanks, Eli.
Yeah, see you, buddy.